Welcome to the Irish NFL Show in association with our partner QuinnBet. You'll be relieved to know that just because it's the off season doesn't mean we're off the air or off the reservation when it comes to keeping tabs on all things NFL. The Combine wrapped yesterday at time of recording. At any rate, we're recording on Monday. And we also have some free agent news to pour over. That includes a new landing spot for the 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel in Washington. And we plenty of free agent intrigue apart from that surrounding some of the big names who may be searching for new teams. That list headed by Myles Garrett and Aaron Rodgers, among others. Kieran Boyle and Brian O'Leary joining me, Conor Brophy, for this edition of the show. And let's start, Kieran, with the Combine, because you are the Combine harvester. You've been paying more attention to it than any man alive, as far as I can see. And lots of notes to pick through here. And I hate to start in a negative place, but I wanted to start with Will Howard, because the furore over how he performed at the Combine, to me, underlines one of the issues with the Combine going forward, and one that we've seen over the past couple of seasons rear its head, where you can now see why a lot of the top prospects do not want to work out at the Combine, because if it doesn't go well for you, all hell breaks loose. Like Will Howard, okay, did not have a good day at the office. A lot of off-target throws. Social media blows up. This clip goes viral of him in over 45, 46 second span throwing, I think, 6 or 7 passes that were wide of target, receivers having to climb the ladder to get anywhere near them, a couple way overthrown. Not a good look, but this guy wins a national championship for Ohio State. Now suddenly everybody's dumping on him. This is exactly why you wouldn't want to work out at the Combine.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off. It was an odd Combine, because you're missing a lot of the top performers in each position, from the quarterbacks to the running backs to Tyler Warren and Loveland, the tight ends. It's really only the both sides of the line who really went out there and put a marker on the Combine and showed everybody about what they got. The Will Howard stuff, I mean, you're going out there and you're throwing to people that you've never met before. I don't want to call them guys off the street, but they're not exactly, decorated wide receivers, which is why over the years you've seen more.
Sanders made this point as well, right? So he actually, in fairness to him, came to Will Howard's defense. He said, what are you talking about? Like, every wide receiver runs routes completely differently. It's no small thing to throw to a guy you've never thrown to before, because you just don't know where he's going and he doesn't know where you're throwing.
Right, which is exactly why a lot of quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks, are focusing more on the pro days. And I think as the years go on, I don't want to say the Combine will lose a lot of its importance, but you're going to see, especially, I've talked about it in the past with a lot of these players playing into December and January in the playoffs. There's less for them to prove. So you're going to see more of the pro day kind of emphasis going forward, because he's going to be throwing to his own wide receivers. He's going to be throwing to players that he's comfortable with and that he knows. I mean, we saw on the sideline, Cam Ward. Who was Cam Ward thrown to? He was thrown to Restrepo, who was his go-to target at Miami. So they're going to be comfortable at the pro days, which is where you're going to see that the quarterbacks kind of emphasize over the next couple of years, and less the star performers. And again, it's not a star-laden quarterback class this year, but you're going to see them ease toward the pro day and focus all of that. So the next couple of weeks, I mean, I think Ohio State's pro day is March 27th. If Will Howard goes out there and throws dots to all his receivers, the Combine stuff will be forgotten about for the most part. Now,
it's almost less important for him, and I know you don't want to dismiss the idea that his draft stock may plummet because of this. Now, anyone who's smart and who's watched the tape and goes to see him work out at a pro day will make up their own mind, and they're not going to be swayed by recency bias. But for anyone who has anything to lose draft stock wise, which I think is the point you're making, these guys are going to be strongly considering whether to go in 2026 and beyond. So it's potentially quite a big headache for the NFL. They're going to have to start thinking differently about how the Combine is structured and whether it can continue to exist in its current form.
Well, exactly, and it's a TV product from Wednesday or Tuesday and Wednesday up till yesterday evening, and it doesn't serve the NFL any good if the star performers or the top 5 players in the draft or the top players the marquee players in each position are sitting there and just doing sound bites and they're not performing. So there's going to be some restructurings. Things will have to get smoothed out in that regard. But going back to Howard, I mean, I kind of compare him to, if you remember Stetson Bennett from Georgia a couple of years ago, same thing. They won a national championship. He's not going in the first round, Will Howard, despite what he did yesterday and despite what he may do at his pro day. I mean, the scouts will have books written on him and all that stuff. He's going to be Stetson Bennett went 4th round. He's going to be a 2nd, 3rd rounder at that. So he didn't, social media did blow up and, he was throwing the ball all over the place. Guys were dropping it. Guys were going the wrong routes. ultimately it won't matter much after the noise of the social media stuff dies down, because it's all going to be on what he does at his pro day, where he's comfortable. His coaches will be able to talk to the scouts there, so it's going to be a much more kind of a streamlined and a smoother process when they're back in Columbus in a couple of weeks. So yes, it didn't look great for him, and the way the social media is these days, everything's so immediate. For a couple of hours, he probably takes a hit, but he goes out in a couple of weeks and he throws dots, and it'll all be forgotten about. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts, and that's just the whole kind of swings and roundabouts of the combine. Everything is immediate. Everything is closely analyzed, and then we move on to the next thing, because already we're at free agency, which we're going to talk about in a little while. So yeah, the combine owned the headlines and it owned the TV for the week. NFL moves on to the next thing.
To finish the combine coverage on a positive note, who showed out for you? A couple of names that I'm seeing here getting some strong hype. Nick Emenwari, the safety from South Carolina, people saying there's a first rounder there, scores off the charts. Jackson Dart, Ole Miss quarterback, seemed to do pretty well.
Yeah, Dart had a good combine. Him and Dylan Gabriel. Gabriel's, I put it on the Twitter feed over the weekend. Gabriel's issue is not his arm, it's his height. He's 5'11". He's mobile, but he's got a great arm, which may save him when it comes to draft time. But Jackson Dart has he had a great day. He's got the look, he's got the mullet going on. He was throwing the ball all over the place. He looked comfortable as opposed to some of the others. Riley Leonard didn't have a great. He didn't cover himself in glory, and there's a lot of kind of 4th, 5th, 6th round quarterbacks that were just really out there filling space. Matthew Golden, wide receiver from Texas. Spoke early in the week about trying to break Xavier Worthy's time at the combine from last year. He showed out really well. Not overly big. He's a 5'11" slot receiver, but he's fast as lightning. Tateroa McMillan from Arizona, 6'4". He had a good showing. And then we saw the clip of that Armand Mumbu, the 330-pound tackle who ran a sub 5-second 40, which is ridiculous when you think about it. You've got somebody of that size able to run that fast. Couple other players, Luther Burden from Missouri, didn't do himself any harm. And then there's a couple of, Mason Taylor, if you remember Jason Taylor from the Dolphins, his kid was really good at LSU, really good hands for a tight end. He had a good performance. Again, more highlighted by the fact that Loveland and Tyler Warren weren't out there catching the ball. Tyler Booker, who's an O lineman from Alabama. Again, Alabama. The big colleges produce these big horses up front. Alabama, Michigan always produces a ton of O-linemen. Wisconsin produces a lot. We know Ohio State had a really good O-line. So, good showing from those guys. Wide receiver room, pretty good. Emeka Ogbogu from Ohio State, who we saw destroy Oregon in the playoffs. Terrence Ferguson, the tight end as well from Oregon, despite the fact he didn't have a great playoff. But just names that we're going to start getting more and more familiar with over the next couple of months. Nobody did themselves any real damage. Nobody really did themselves, push themselves over the edge in any great regard. It's the wow kind of factors other times. If somebody runs a 4.2 or a 4.3, that's going to have the headlines. Membu, the O tackle, was grunting, and he got a lot of kind of press for the way that he ran the 40. And it was just it's more of a fact of nobody really did any damage. Nobody put themselves in a hole. Everyone kind of went through the process, which is kind of why there may be some changes coming with the combine. It wasn't an outstanding combine. Nothing really, there wasn't any big headlines, other than Deebo grabbing the Saturday evening headlines. But again, I said it last week. It's not a star-laden draft, but it's a draft that's full of starters, more so on both sides of the line. And especially tight ends. There may be 2 tight ends going to the top 10, which is a pretty rare thing. So, good copy this weekend. Good stuff. Phenomenal athletes on display, and they just get quicker, faster, stronger year on year, it seems.
Yeah, they sure do. A lot of eating in that. Thanks, Kieran. That gives us a lot to mull over between now and the draft. You mentioned Deebo there, and Brian, as we mentioned at the top, Deebo Samuel going from the 49ers to the Commanders. A little bit of surprise maybe, certainly given where he was at the start of last season, that ultimately the haul that the 49ers recruit for this is only a 5th round pick. His stock had definitely fallen. The injuries stack up over the years. There's a lot of miles on Deebo's clock, and I think No, we'll see how he is next season, but certainly seemed to be affecting him this year. He just wasn't quite the same threat that he has been, which affected what they got back for him. Is this a good landing spot for him? Because it's on the surface, you say, "Ooh, another target for Jayden Daniels makes the Commanders even more dangerous next year." But it'll be interesting to see where they put him.
Whether it's a good landing spot or not is, for me, is up in the air. It does reflect well in terms of what we discussed last week. Connor, you asked the question last week, where will he end up? We didn't necessarily name teams to a certain extent, but we say it was a team that would feel like they're very close to getting that final, getting above the line, shall we say, and getting ultimately to the promised land. And you can argue that is the Commanders. I mean, they've come in one game short of making the Super Bowl. I'm not entirely sure he's going to put this team in a position where they're going to, Deebo's going to be the difference between whether they're in the championship game next year or making the Super Bowl. I think it's a nice addition to an offense that will probably allow Cliff Kingsbury to kind of come up with some new schemes that will suit the player. In terms of the 5th round pick, upon reflection, probably right because of the contract and we start having to absorb and take on. And they're a team that's got plenty of cap space. So they probably feel like it's justified in taking it on a 5th round pick. But I know we spoke briefly today. You're looking at what they have, and I'm not entirely sure he's going to be that player that can really put them over the top. I think it'd be a nice addition, but is it going to be the huge difference for this Commanders team? I think the Commanders have more holes to fill on defense for them to be back challenging again next year. It's a nice addition, but I'm not entirely sure it's not. It doesn't have the wow factor that some people were suggesting.
But it's telling you though, Brian, at the same time, and I think when we chatted earlier, we were saying Commanders this year kind of looking like the Texans last year, and that you like that they're not by any means resting on their laurels. They're in the Myles Garrett sweepstakes as well, potentially. Themselves and the Eagles look like they're going to fight over him. They know they have holes to fill, and they know that staying still is only going to move you backwards in the NFL, and they need to put more pieces around Jayden Daniels. They're conscious of that 5th round pick. It's a 1-year rental really on Deebo. They wouldn't pick up a receiver of that quality with a 5th round pick, albeit that obviously he'd be on a rookie contract and you'd have him around for a few years. But I like the idea of the move. As we said, we'll see how it works out in reality.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. This is a kind of, I wouldn't say it's a prove type of year for Deebo, but essentially, like, we could be here in 12 months and it could be one of the most masterful signings very early in the offseason before we get into the chaos that's ahead next week with free agency, albeit this is a trade. But we could be here in 12 months. Yeah, that was the player that really pushed him on. Or it could be, yeah, it hasn't worked out. It didn't materialize at all to what some Commanders fans will have hopes for. And then they move off him and they've only given up a 5th round pick. But obviously you have to look into the details of can they move off the contract. But look, it's a flyer, and it's a flyer, but they're in a good position to do these flyers. That's the thing. This team is, they've built up the credit now. The head coach, the GM, and Kingsbury have built up enough credit that they can go after these players. And maybe there's other teams around the league that would like to bring in Deebo, but because of the pressure, the situation of the coaching staff may not feel it's the appropriate move at this time coming into a new season.
Yeah, and the Commanders playing with a lot of cap space as well, so they can definitely do some deals, and they're going to be a franchise very much to watch over the next week or so as we see all that rumor mill really wind up ahead of the league start in just over 10 days' time. Kieran, Aaron Rodgers and the Giants with Matthew Stafford staying in LA. Looks like Aaron is the man most likely to potentially stay in New York, albeit swapping the green for the blue. I'm going to tell you, I've seen this movie before in Chicago, albeit it was with Andy Dalton rather than Aaron Rodgers, so a much more rarefied air for you guys. But this is a move that's aimed at saving a coach and a general manager, and may not necessarily be in the best interest of the franchise, unless there's a little bit more in the Aaron Rodgers tank than last season might have led you to believe.
Well, I hear he's just had some work done in his kitchen in his house in Jersey, and I know he's been blowing the phone up of Shane and Dable apparently, or his agents. I didn't want any part of Matt Stafford with the Giants. I didn't think it worked at all. I think, family reasons, that the wife's got a podcast out in Los Angeles. It didn't make any sense for me. It didn't seem like a good fit. This just screams chaos and anarchy because, and this is something the Giants need right now. I mean, they've been the most vanilla franchise the last couple of years. They've been, pedestrian, nothing exciting. I'm not even going to bring up Tommy Cutlets and what he did. But that was the only spark they've had since Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, it's been very boring, and it's been very vanilla, and it's replicated in the stands, because you saw towards the end of the season there's no real reason for Giants fans to go anymore. I mean, there's nothing on the field that would excite them. Rodgers brings in an absolute X factor. What's he going to do? He may toe the line. He may decide that this is how he wants his career to end. He's going to go out and be a solid teammate, or he may just decide to do what he's done for the rest of the last kind of 4 or 5 years of his career and set fire to everything. I'm here for it because there's no other options. I mean, they again, there's more talk of the Giants trading up with the Titans for the number 1 spot. I don't know what thinking is behind that, but if you pick up Rodgers and you draft, let's say you pick up Dart for some reason, or you pick up one of the top 2 quarterbacks. What's the harm in picking up Rodgers? He's going to bring copy. Yes, he's a kind of cast off from the Jets, but the Giants they're not in a position to kind of send quarterbacks away right now where they don't have anybody. So I would welcome it. I welcome the chaos, and I would welcome the storylines. Maybe he brings Devontae Adams with him. I mean, Devontae Adams and Malik Neighbors on both sides of the field is that's an option the Giants fans would sign up for right away. He brings all the nonsense and he brings all the baggage, but I mean, Dable and Shane need wins yesterday. I mean, 7 wins might not be enough for them to keep their jobs. So any avenue that they can find that's going to get them wins, whether it be, from a quarterback or whatever route, they've got to take it, because they're in a win now mode, because they will not be here this time next year. So they've got to do something to salvage their careers right now. And if Rodgers is the guy to do it, then I'm okay with it.
And look, I'll tell you, of the options available, as you outline it there, if you're taking Aaron Rodgers with whoever you select at 3 sitting behind him for a year, versus Russell Wilson or Sam Darnold, I think he's definitely the pick of that later. I don't think there's any question about that. And for all that people might deride Rodgers' ability to nurture young talent, Jordan Love didn't exactly do too badly out of that deal. I know he sat behind him for 4 years, and there were other people to learn from too, but it was tough love, but no pun intended, but it certainly seemed to pan out for the Packers in the medium term. So I wouldn't be too dismissive of that move. I think, as you say, if nothing else, it'll be fun. Brian, you wanted to make a point on the boy Aaron before we move on from that one.
Yeah, I've had a few people say to me over the weekend that I'm rolling back slightly because I'm in favour of this move, which I'm aligned with Kieran. And in fairness, me and Kieran, as much as we love the Giants, there is times where we differ on certain opinions, which we have done over the course of the year. And I had a few people say to me, "Oh, now all of a sudden you're in on Aaron Rodgers." I said, "I'm not in on Aaron Rodgers per se. I'm in on the scenario that we have to play with." And Kieran's kind of alluded to there. You got to look at where a team is right now. And right now, your Giants are in a situation where if they bring in a rookie quarterback in the 4th round and play him immediately, and they only win 5 or 6 games, well, the 2 guys are gone. So what are you trying to do? They've been very clear and precise in their strategy going forward. They said it last week at the Combine. We're going to bring in an experienced quarterback, and hopefully we bring in a rookie quarterback and essentially mold them together and try and make it work. So to bring in Aaron Rodgers, for me, he's the best option of what's out there. What's the alternative? Russell Wilson, we didn't really tap into there. He probably is the contender alongside Aaron Rodgers in terms of the experienced quarterback. And then, as bad as the Jets were last year, and I'm not trying to tail back and say, "Oh, he had a fantastic season." There was chaos. He still threw for 3,987 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. It's not a bad year coming off an Achilles.
He had a terrible O-line as well.
Yeah, and the Giants O-line in the game has been touted this week as one of the worst in the league. The Giants O-line was playing considerably well up to week 6, week 7. Andrew Thomas went down, and thereafter other players went down. And before you knew it, we were kind of back to the year previous where we're rolling in players off practice squads to play. But when they had that solidified 5 together, which they put together at the start of the season in terms of Joe Shane's plan, it worked quite well for a period of time. And Daniel Jones had numerous opportunities to win games, and it wasn't down to poor offensive line play. He's 41. It's a flyer. It's a 1 year. As Kieran's alluded to, it could be a year later where we're saying that was a masterful stroke. It may not lead to playoffs, but he could go out on a high. I don't think he wants to go out in the scenario in which he's just had. And there really isn't many other options for him.
Either way, he'll be going out on a high. He'll be back on the ayahuasca no matter what happens.
Yeah, but that's true. But if you look at from his perspective, what's the better option around the league? Yeah, like the Browns, by all accounts today, speculations, they're definitely going to take a quarterback in the draft. And what else is on the table for him? So Look, I think I'm not entirely convinced it's going to come to fruition either. I think it's a lot of speculation. We'll probably have clarity in the next 10 days, but I think most Giants fans, for where we are right now, would accept this as probably the best solution ahead of his draft.
You mentioned the Browns, which is kind of opposite, because it looks like there's a potential that Daniel Jones could actually be heading in that direction as he leaves New York. Browns and the Colts being touted as potential destinations for him. The Browns also looking like they may be without the services of Myles Garrett next season. He doesn't want to stay. They don't have to trade him, but they'd probably be wise to entertain offers at this stage for a player who clearly doesn't want to be there, wants to go somewhere where he can win. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Philadelphia and Washington looking like two of the more likely destinations. Like this guy at the Eagles, you can give up on the NFC East next year no matter who's playing quarterback. Kieran, sorry.
Yeah, I mean it's funny that that story that dropped about Garrett a couple of weeks ago. We haven't heard anything about it ever since. That's just the NFL carousel. But yeah, I mean Garrett's looking around, and again he's 30 and he's losing every year consistently with the Browns, and he's trying to get a win, and he's trying to get a ring just like everybody else. And like you said, those are two very attractive destinations. You know, stay in the Northeast. Cowboys are also an option. He's a guy from Texas A&M. Go back to if the Cowboys ever do something with Parsons. So there's a lot of places for him to end up. And there's a lot of teams that would absolutely love to have somebody like Myles Garrett on there. The thing with the Browns, I mean, we also heard earlier on today that they're moving on from Deshaun Watson. So it's probably in synergy here. Move on from Watson at some stage, get rid of Garrett, just kind of retool and kind of try and build up in the draft. Again, we saw that, again, I don't want to labor the point, but the two teams in the Super Bowl were basically draft. Each player was a draft pick and very few free agents. So that's the way to do it. That's the way the GMs are doing it from now on. And, that's probably the best thing for the Browns to do after that horrendous Watson deal. So, there'll be plenty of suitors for him. It's strange how the talk died down over the last couple of weeks. It's almost like, the market's gone cold on him. But I'm sure, once free agency starts next week and once teams start throwing players back and forth at each other, that the Garrett sweepstakes will warm up pretty quickly. Again, if he goes to Philadelphia, what do you do there? I mean, even Washington's defense, who struggled down the stretch in December and January, they would love to have somebody like him. So plenty of suitors. So that's going to be a fun watch as well. A player who's I would also keep the Cowboys in mind purely for the Texas link. So plenty of suitors, and it'd be fun to see where he ends up.
Final one before we wrap, Brian, is the Steelers situation, where you might have expected that they'd stay with Russell Wilson after the way he finished last season and the way that Mike Tomlin clearly chose him over Justin Fields, despite Fields going 4-2 in his first six starts and not looking too shabby in the process. But looks now like the Steelers very much leaning in the direction of hanging on to Justin Fields and Russell Wilson going and seeking his fortune elsewhere, which is an interesting move in both directions.
Yeah, but it just strikes me as we're going to be back in a situation come the end of the summer where we're going to reflect on what it was last year, because I don't think anyone genuinely believe Justin Fields is going to be the long-term solution there at quarterback. I can understand that they're making a call of which one they feel they can not necessarily win with, but be productive.
We've been talking about the long-term solution at quarterback in Pittsburgh since Big Ben finished up. Isn't
that the frustration? Yeah, isn't that the frustration that all Steelers fans? We joke during the season, we'd love to have that. We'd love to have what they have in terms of going to the playoffs. But I think Steelers fans are reflecting now of it's kind of status quo year in, year out. We make the playoffs, and yet we're gone after the fourth game. We're dumped out very quickly. And it's not even the nature of being dumped out. They're convincingly dumped out. The year before against the Bills, they had a bit of a renaissance with Rudolph playing reasonably well in that game in the cold weather. They were comprehensively beaten by the Ravens this year. I think Steelers fans want to get to a situation where I think they might even take I won't say year off, but I think they'd be happy if they knew they had the long-term solution and it meant they didn't make the playoffs, but yet they had a quarterback they knew was the right plan for the future. But Justin Fields, for me, will be rolled out in this offense next season for your third and shorts and run pass options. And they may even start the season with him, get into a situation where they're productive and have a good record. They bring someone else in them for the middle stretch of the season. Who's it going to be? Again, you're going to go back to, is Aaron Rodgers the kind of player that you felt that would have been a solution there? But then it's another copycat. It's not Russell Wilson. It's another Asian quarterback. So they are probably one. It's
gonna
another
cut Kirk
precarious
Cousins.
one. Yeah, maybe Kirk Cousins isn't. Look, there's so much going to happen over the next week. This time next week, hopefully we'll be live and there'll be so many signings and we might get a glimmer of light what's going to happen. But Steelers probably is one of the most interesting ones because where we kind of get a sense of where the Giants are rolling one way or another, and other teams who need a quarterback. Just there's no white smoke coming out of Pittsburgh right now around what their plan is or their strategy. They're keeping things very close to their chest.
Kirk Cousins, by the way, was the subject of one of my favorite random, completely inconsequential but kind of funny off-season factoids. Somebody dug out that until the Eagles won the Super Bowl, no team that had lost a game to Kirk Cousins during the regular season had ever gone on to win the Super Bowl. The Kirk curse was finally broken by the Eagles in the Super Bowl. There you go. There's one to keep you safe as we head off into the night. That's it for the Irish NFL show. We'll be back with you very soon.